Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I'm going to talk about Brexit. But before you rush away, I'm going to talk particularly about how much more serious the effects of Brexit are going to be, especially at a time when we're facing these huge cost of living increases, and how Brexit only makes matters worse. If you have not already subscribed, I'd be really grateful if you would, and if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, I'd also very much appreciate that too. So today I'm going to talk about Brexit, but I'm not going to talk about, for example, I'm not going to talk about how, as a result of Brexit, we've become a worldwide laughingstock, and we're now seen as a bunch of incompetents led by a complete and utter clown. A clown who, I think, a couple of weeks ago, he was leading the Ukrainian fight against the Russians. I don't think he's doing that anymore. And yesterday he was arranging for Sweden and Finland to join NATO. I think if he's got a bit of time, he's going to fire up the economy, isn't he? And solve the cost of living crisis by, just that, firing up the economy. Now, as I say, I'm not going to talk about the Northern Ireland Protocol, where we are actually telling the whole world that we're going to breach an international agreement which we signed. In other words, we're telling the whole world that any agreement made with the United Kingdom in future cannot be taken on face value. It's probably not worth the paper it's written on. This is all to appease a small group, the DUP in Northern Ireland, who don't like the idea of there being any controls on goods going between GB and Northern Ireland. I'm also not going to talk about how the pound is collapsing, making all our imports much more expensive, nor about how our exports are down, and how about our economy is shrinking. It's forecast to shrink from 4% per year, and it has already. I mean, last month was down 0.1%, and that is only going to get worse. I'm also not going to talk about the shortages of labour as a result of us making it virtually impossible for EU workers to come here, now that we only want the brightest and the best, and how we haven't got people to work in the fields, and people to work in the care homes, and people to work in hospitality, and all the other things we know about. And I'm also not going to talk about all these queues of lorries at Dover where they're having such trouble getting across, and there are so many delays that sooner or later EU suppliers are going to say, sorry, we're not going to supply the UK. It's just not worth the hassle, because there is so much hassle involved in bringing goods to the UK now. Well, it's not bringing goods to the UK, it's getting back afterwards, and us taking any goods to the EU. Anyway, as I say, I'm not going to discuss that at the moment. The other thing I'm not going to mention is also about the London tourist trade. Now, 2019, I think we were the second equal with Paris, most visited in the whole world. Masses and masses of tourists, particularly from the EU, used to come here, and they'd spend, I think it was 19 million visitors came in 2019. That was the last year before the pandemic, spending billions, literally billions, on hotels and on food and on entering tourist attractions and buying souvenirs and buying things to take back, clothes and all the rest of it. That's just been wiped out, really, because, and there's one reason for this, it's because for anyone from the EU coming to the UK previously, all they needed was their ID card, which they could use to travel all over the EU. But now they have to get a passport. So anybody wanting to come here, apart from the fact that they look upon the UK as being a hostile country now, they need a passport. And so if you've got particularly school groups, thousands and thousands and thousands of school groups used to come to the UK. They don't come anymore because you're not going to get all your children applying for passports, and passports can be quite expensive, takes a lot of time. Why are you going to bother? Go somewhere else. So as I say, I'm not going to talk about that, and I'm not going to talk about how if you want to travel to the EU now, if you go by plane, you've got to wait for hours, and very often wait hours in the queue for non-EU members, whereas previously you just almost walk through. And how you've got to get your passport stamped and so on. I'm not going to talk about the fact that if you will go to the EU, you need a green card now. You need green card insurance for your car. You need health insurance. If you can take an animal, you need pet insurance and all the rest of it. It's become very, very complicated. Now, I'm not going to talk about that at all. I'm also not going to talk about that how since we've left the EU, we don't have to worry about dumping sewage in the rivers and the sea. All the water companies, as we know, are all almost all foreign owned by people in Australia and in America and all over the place. So they don't care. All they care about is making profits. But now they can just dump all the sewage in. I mean, the tourist industry in the UK, the seaside industry, is going to take a real hit this year, because who in their right minds is going to go for a seaside holiday, sit on the beach and swim in water where the water company is just chucking all their sewage? And so that's because previously we couldn't do that when we were in the EU. We can now dump everything in whatever we want, rivers, sea, whatever, just dump it. I'm not going to talk about our policy of diverging our standards, whereby we've got our own UKCA mark now, so we don't have the European CE mark. We don't need to use that anymore. We've got our own one. So it sort of companies all over the world that are manufacturing, for example, in China, they'll test everything as they've always done to CE mark, but then they have to do another test, which would be much more expensive and add cost and delays. So that they can conform with our standards, our UKCA mark. No, I don't want to talk about any of that, really. What I really want to talk about is trade and how trade is being affected as a result of us leaving the EU. Now, since we've left, we are now a third country. We've volunteered to go behind a barrier of obstacles to doing trade with the EU. At the moment, we haven't erected any barriers yet, because we're not ready. It's only been 6 years since we voted to leave, so we haven't had time to get them anything set up. And it's going to be I think the end of next year, the end of 2023, when we're going to actually start controlling, goods coming into the UK. But nonetheless, it's very, very difficult. In fact, for small or medium-sized companies, it's almost impossible now to export to the EU. I know that from my experience. It's not the fact that I was not prepared to do all the paperwork. It's my customers were not prepared to do the paperwork. They just don't want the bother. And we know, for example, companies all over the UK who would have been selling mail order or through Amazon or eBay or whatever can't do it anymore, because the expenses involved are so high. Likewise, we find it's very difficult for us to import stuff from the EU, stuff you buy on the internet. For example, a few weeks ago, I bought something that cost £15. It was a belt I ordered from Germany. Went through, put all the details in and so on, and said, what country? I said, UK, £25 surcharge. So something you buy for £15 is £40. Of course, I didn't buy it, and I wouldn't buy it. And unless it's something you absolutely have to have, nobody's going to buy anything from the EU anymore. So it's a huge chunk of trade. Millions and millions and millions of transactions, which have really come to an end because it is too expensive and too complicated. Now, when I made my first video, which was back in February last year, 15 months ago, I tried to, by way of an analogy, try to explain exactly how Brexit really works. And I'd like to do that again. I'll just run through it again to give you some idea, because I think this does give you a much better idea of what has actually happened. Supposing, instead of being in the UK, we were a giant supermarket. Supposing we were Tesco's. And Tesco has a board of directors. I mean, Tesco's is a fantastic, worldwide, world-renowned company, massive company. Tens and tens of thousands of employees, and just incredibly complicated. Huge organisation. So you have a board of directors, and you had let's say we had a chairman there. He was called, or chief executive. He's called Mr. Cameron. And on the board, all the directors, and one of the directors was a man called Farage. And Mr. Farage suddenly said one day, well, I think we should change the way we run the company. Completely change it. It'd be better. And not only that, we'd be able to go and buy our own products all over the world. We won't have to sell the same things as Sainsbury's and Asda and Morrison's and all the rest of it. And Mr. Cameron and everyone else said, well, no, everything's going fine. Everything's fine. We're okay. There's things we can do better and so on. We don't need to just completely change the whole system. Might be a bit reckless, isn't it? But Farage then started talking to staff, and he kept going and agitating and so on and getting them all worked up about it. He kept saying, the Turks are going to come and take all your jobs if you're not careful. And there's foreign people that work there. You've got an Italian, you've got a Spaniard working in shelf filling. They've only come here all they've come here for is to get benefits and take our housing. And so he would stir up. And eventually the chairman, Mr. Cameron, decides that we'll shut this man up. We'll have a vote on it. And so the board of directors, all very clever, experienced people, knew what they're doing and so on. They decide to ask all the employees whether or not they should change the way the whole company is run. And so they asked the shelf stackers, the cashiers, the people who work in the warehouse, the drivers, people who know nothing about how the company is run, do you think we should change the way we run the company? And with a lot of nagging by Farage, and lots of leaflets sent out by various rich people who tried to persuade the staff to change the company, shareholders perhaps, eventually by an overwhelming majority of 52 to 48, they decided to change the whole way the company is run. And so they changed the way the company is run. A bit further down the line, when you go to Tesco under the new system, which is introduced, you go to Tesco. A bit of a queue to get in the car park these days because you've got to sign in when you come in. Oh, and it's probably best if you book online before you go to do your shopping. But you go there, you get your trolley, you get all the stuff up, fill up, and you get to the cashier. And you've got 30, 40, 50 items there, and the cashier says, right, under the new system, unfortunately, because we've got a new system, we've had to put the prices up a little bit, but, sorry about that, but, it's the new procedures. What you have to do is list all the products you've bought, and we need a commodity code for each one. Now, some of these products that you've bought will have components from countries that are outside of countries with whom we don't have trade agreements. So for those, you'll have to pay some duty. Some of them will need certificates of origin. You have to go to the local chamber of commerce to get a certificate of origin, and then you'll have to pay VAT on anything that's VATable. But don't worry, because you can get the VAT back in 3 months' time. It's all a bit complicated, so you probably have to get an agent to do this. In the meantime, if you just park your shopping over there in that corner there, and you can come back as soon as you've got all the paperwork done and as soon as you've paid all your money in 3 or 4 days' time. And that's your Brexit. That is the Brexit. Whereas all the other supermarkets are just going on, you go and buy what you want, go to the cashier and pay out and you go. With this one, with Tesco, with the United Kingdom, you have all this amazing mass of red tape. And people just don't want it. If you're running a business, you've got so much to do, particularly a small or medium-sized business, there's so much to do. You haven't got whole departments to deal with this, the whole departments to do that. Half the time you might be doing it yourself. People can't do it. And so what we've done by deciding to go to voluntarily go to the other side of the barrier, this massive barrier to stop free trade with the EU, we made it so complicated that it's killing business. It is inevitable. And so the problem is that it's not going to get any better. This clown Johnson says, he's going to cut out red tape. He's going to slash red tape. What else? I mean, it's just so. The whole government thing now is run on propaganda. Our government is run on propaganda. It's not policy. It's not sense. It's all propaganda. It's building back better and sunlit uplands and just talking to people as though they're completely utterly stupid. And the stupidest of all is fire up the economy. We are approaching a massive cost of living crisis. Now, a lot of that is to do with post-pandemic supply chain problems and all sorts of reasons beyond our control, but so much of this is to do with Brexit, and it is going to be made so much worse because of Brexit. For example, as I said earlier, foreign food producers are not going to come to the UK. If you have 27, 28 markets, and they're all easy to deal with. You just put the goods on the lorry goes there, it comes back with a signed delivery note, that's all you need. And you've got one where you've got to come and you've got to go and employ an agent to do this, and you've got to do this paperwork and that paperwork, all the rest of it. You don't want hassle in a business. You know, throughout the time I've been in business, which is a very long time, business has got easier and easier and easier and smoother and smoother and smoother. And there isn't really any way around this. I mean, you know, I keep complaining about Brexit, and people say, well, what would you do about it? Well, I suppose the obvious thing is rejoin the single market and the customs union. But that's the government will never ever do that. Not with this particular government anyway, with their crazy right wing backbenchers and people like the DUP. So that's where we are now. It's a complete and utter mess, and everybody can see now. Everyone's obviously concerned about rising prices, but everyone can see that Brexit is not working out. It's an absolute disaster. It's produced so many problems and no benefits whatsoever. And as I said before, Brexit will directly be responsible for additional price increases because European suppliers are going to find us a more and more difficult market to deal with, and are going to be reluctant to come here as much as previously because it's not seamless. UK producers, farm producers, are not going to produce the food they've produced previously because of the problems with labour, both of which will result in increasing prices. It's virtually impossible for small and medium-sized businesses to export to the EU because of all the bureaucracy we have to overcome. And not only that we have to overcome, but all our customers in the EU have to put up with, and they're just not prepared to do it any more than, as I explained before, we are. I mean, if you look at the business we've lost through mail order, quite apart from small businesses dealing with small businesses or medium-sized businesses between us and Europe, that's all gone now. And so we have clearly a shrinking economy, and the pound is falling, and confidence generally in this country seems to be disappearing. We're also at the point, we made it quite clear, Liz Truss has made it clear that we're on the point of ripping up the Northern Ireland Protocol. This is in order to satisfy Jeffrey Donaldson and the DUP. Now, the majority in last week's elections in Northern Ireland were all in favour of keeping the protocol, but no, the DUP don't want it, and so we're prepared to risk a trade war with the EU. The EU, that's 22 miles away, the biggest, richest trading group in the world, which we've left, and we're prepared to sacrifice any possibility of a deal with the United States in order to keep the DUP a minority party, to keep them happy. Now you'll see these days, you'll never hear the government mention Brexit. It's a dirty word because they know Brexit is responsible for so much of what is going bad. And the government, of course, has become a propaganda department now. And we can see we're facing all these huge cost of living price increases and so on, and really big problems. And the propaganda department's or Johnson's response is that he's going to fire up the economy. That's how he's going to solve it. He's going to fire up the economy, make us all high-skilled, high-wage employees. Now, if there was a plan to fire up the economy, I don't know why the fire isn't burning yet. They've had 12 years to get it going. But anyway, if there was a plan to, it's going to take years and years and years. People are going to be struggling with electricity bills and buying groceries in 2 months' time, 3 months' time. A lot of people are already struggling. And he's going to fire up the economy, just like he's going to level up and he's going to build back better and all this stuff. It's just garbage. But if you repeat it often enough, then people start to believe it. So we're behind this absolute mountain of red tape, this huge barrier to doing trade with our near neighbours, and there isn't any answer. There's not. It's like you burnt down the top 2 floors of your house, and you're talking about how much nicer you're going to build it back. I mean, how are you going to do that? We haven't got any money. And I think as far as shrinking markets are concerned and increasing prices, if you imagine we've all got an income and we've all got expenses, and if you imagine that you've got so much income and you have certain things you have to pay your mortgage or your rent, and you've got to pay your council tax, you've got to pay electricity, gas and so on. they're all going up. Interest rates are going up, so even your mortgage is going up. And then you've got to pay for your food, and the price of food is going up. Now, that means that the amount of money left over after you've paid for all these other things is either none, or it's getting smaller and smaller, that amount. And so consequently, you've got less money to spend. You've got less money to go out to restaurants, to go to bars, to go to shops, to buy clothes, or to go on holiday, to do all the things we do with what we call discretionary spending. And that inevitably, I mean, it's going to happen. We have less to. The economy must shrink because we have less money. We're going to have much less money to spend. And consequently, more and more firms are getting into difficulty. More and more firms are going to find they simply cannot survive. I mean, if you're a restaurant now and you're just about surviving, and you find because everybody's prices, everything, all prices have gone up, and you've had to put your price up as well, of course, but everybody else's prices have gone up, people have not got enough money to come to your restaurant anymore, you're going to go bust. And so this is a kind of spiral, but it's all made so much worse by us being, by us having left the EU and having turned our backs on that vast market. Anyway, if you've watched this far, thank you very much. And if you haven't already subscribed, I'd appreciate it if you would. And if you might hit the like button, I'd be very grateful. And until next time, fingers crossed, and bye for now.